In this video, I'm going to be reviewing a 1960s Montblanc 149 with oblique double broad nib. I'll go over the specs, I will do a writing sample, and I'll tell you what I like and don't like about this pen coming up. So this is the Montblanc 149. This particular one is from the 1960s, and I want to just hopefully quickly talk about why I like these 1960s models the very best. The most desirable models are from the 1950s. They have a celluloid body. They have what they call the silver rings. So these two small outer rings on the cap would have been silver. They had the telescopic filling mechanism, which was more complicated. Definitely, those 1950s pens were probably most expensive to make of the 149s. However, because they were celluloid, they had problems with shrinking. So like you would have issues where, the caps wouldn't necessarily fit together. There would be like just kind of like shrunken parts of the barrel. The cap rings could become loose. And then with the telescopic filling mechanism, I don't really understand why this would happen, but you would start to, like the barrel would start to become clear in places where that mechanism was. So like the pens wouldn't always stay black. Now, there are good examples of them. I've had a couple of very nice 146s that were celluloid with that same filling mechanism, and they didn't have that issue where the body wasn't discoloring, but they also have a cork seal, so they need to be replaced, and they need to be replaced by somebody that is a real professional, because the pens, when they're celluloid Montblancs, they're valuable and they're fragile in the disassembly part. Now, I'm not saying don't buy one of those. I'm just saying, for me personally, it's not worth the headache, even though the older you go with these pens, typically the better the nibs are that you're going to get. Now, the reason I like the 1960s is because this is the first resin pen, and it doesn't suffer from shrinkage. It doesn't suffer from that discoloration. You're not going to have loose cap rings, and you're still going to get very, very nice nibs. Maybe not quite as flexible, but pretty nice. So this is a 1960s one. Let's walk through the pen, and I'll identify the areas where you can kind of tell this is a 1960s pen. So from the outside, just looking at this, it's that classic torpedo cigar shape that is so famous. But looking at this versus a newer one without taking the cap off, there are some things you want to look at. So like the cap ring here says Germany, which tells you something. There's nothing underneath the clip, so it doesn't say PIX. There is no serial number on this. It doesn't say West Germany. So that is an indication, first, of the age. The other thing I will point out is the geometry of the clip, the angle. I'll show you a brand new 149, and you will see, looking at this, that the new 149 comes out, the clip comes out quite a bit more, and it's more squared off, whereas this is more rounded and tight to the body. The next area we can take a look at is the cap ring. It says Meisterstück number 149, Montblanc. And this is another indication, just to tell you about the age. You will see that the engravings look a bit different. I always think the older ones look a little bit more high quality, although they're all quite nice quality, to be honest. But you'll see that the ring is smaller, and the engraving, I think, is a little bit deeper. And then if we take the cap off, this is where we start to see a lot more identifying things. First up is the grip section here. We sort of have this like angled collar here that comes back towards the body of the pen, and it's smooth, and it's all one material. This is called the single barrel construction. So it's one piece. On the newer pens, we have two-piece construction, so cheaper to make the new ones. You also notice that the collar is a totally different shape, and it's not even like the same finish. Those are some good giveaways. And then, of course, we have the nib. The nibs you got to be a little bit careful with. There are a lot of different variations. But so this one's a 14C nib. All the new ones will be branded 18K. So this is 14C, and this is called the tritone nib, such that there are three like layers of color here, where on some of them, now the new ones are tritone, but on some of the older pens, I would say from like the 90s, the 80s, maybe the 70s, you'll just have two colors. So you'll have like this outer gold part, and then the inner part will be all silver instead of the outer gold, silver, and gold. So just pointing that out. And then the feed, this is the other big indicator on the age. The really early ones will have what's called the flat ski slope feed. The feeds were all ebonite up until, I want to say, the 90s, maybe the 80s they switched to plastic. I'm not 100% sure. But so this one's called Grooves Face and Shank. So it has grooves in this middle part on both faces of the feed. So this would have been the feed directly after the ski slope feed. So that's how I can kind of identify this pen to being in the 1960s, the early 60s. Other big differences are going to be on the piston knob here. Now, if it was celluloid, they actually would have marked the nib grade on the piston knob. They stopped doing that. I don't know why they stopped doing that, because now when you get a Montblanc, you're going to have no idea what nib grade it is other than just looking at the tip. But so this has plastic threads in the back. There are friction fit ones as well. And then the newer pens, like this one, have brass threads. So if you unscrew the back of this, I have ink in it, so I'm not going to do it. You would see those plastic threads there. And so this is an area you want to check when you're trying to help identify the age of the pen. Anyway, that's maybe not even interesting, but if you're trying to get a 1960s one, that is worth pointing out. I will say this nib has also been adjusted by Michael Masayama, and I've noticed that when you send him a 149, they never go back into the body as far. So here we can see it says 149 at the base of the nib. Normally that would have been hidden. Now, this doesn't affect the writing performance at all, but just pointing that out, if you can see the 149 number, somebody played with the nib a little bit. So I don't think that is a big deal. It makes the nib look a little bit bigger, but I'm just calling that out here because that's not normal for these pens. Now, it's a piston filling system. There is an ink window here with these little like cutout lines, but you can't see it because I have ink in there. In terms of the size, we'll do some measurements and I'll compare it with the new one. So in terms of the length, it's about 148-ish uncapped, and this is with, you know, kind of the longer nib here, about 135. Posted, this is a great pen for posting, and it's comfortable posted, 170. Now in terms of the grip section, at the widest point, 13.3, and at the narrowest, 12.5. This is a very comfortable pen, posted or unposted, and the fat grip section I think makes all the difference for me because the Pelikan M1000 has a similar sized nib, but it has a thinner grip section, and I just don't find it near as comfortable as this. So having that fat grip section makes a big difference. I also noticed the same thing on my Delta Dolce Vita oversized. That is a very fat grip section, and it just makes that big nib much more comfortable. Now, in terms of the weight, let's compare it with the new one. So this is 27 grams, and then uncapped 18 grams, or 17 grams. Now let's check the new one, which has metal in the back of the piston. We're now at 22 grams. So you really do feel that, and because there's metal back there, this does become more back weighted. I still find these pens very comfortable, even posted, but the old ones that didn't have that metal in the back were definitely more comfortable. And then if we go for the total weight, 33 grams versus 27. So it's a noticeable difference, not a huge deal. Now, one thing I will say that I appreciate about the modern 149 is that they kept the same shape as the old one. If you get an old 146, you will notice that it's shorter than the new 146. So they've kind of like elongated the new 146, and it just doesn't visually look as appealing as the original size. But with the 149, they kept the original exactly the same. So that's really nice. Now, if we do some size comparisons, here it is with a Aurora Optima, a Lamy Ion, and a Omas Paragon 557. So you can see it's a proper oversized pen. One other size thing I want to compare here, and we'll do it in the writing sample as well, but we'll just take a close look at it here. If we look at these two tips, we can see that the O3B is wider as we would expect than the OBB, right? Now, in practice, because this nib is so much softer than this nib, this is almost just as wide as this. With no pressure, it is finer, but not by a lot. And then, with pressure, it's just as wide as this pen. So it's just sort of one of the benefits of the older, softer nibs is they are more flexible, and you just get stronger line variation with the older nibs. For the writing sample, I'm going to be using a Papermind Tomoe River hardcover notebook. These notebooks are excellent with fountain pens, and for Blake's Broadcast viewers and subscribers, you can get 10% off with code BB10 at checkout. This is a Montblanc 149 OBB 1960s, and this is Waterman Serenity Blue, and I can't spell, can't write, I mean, the fast writing. That was me lifting, not the pen skipping. This, we are seeing a little bit of skips here. The performance of this nib is really good. It's very soft. So this is no pressure. And if I start applying some pressure, you can definitely get some wider lines. And it's interesting to compare it to the modern O3B. So if we look at the modern O3B, if I apply some pressure, roughly the same, and then no pressure, it's a bit fatter than that. But as I showed before with the nibs, this tip is much wider than the tip on the OBB, as you would expect, but the result, the difference between the two, in practice, isn't that huge, especially if you apply a little bit of pressure to this one, just because this pen is so soft. This is such a nice nib. I'm not going to do reverse writing because there's no point in doing that. Well, you know what? It's going to be the wrong way, though. Yeah, there's no point in doing that. Okay, that's it. I really love this nib. If you find the opportunity to buy one of these for a good price, I say go for it, because this really is a fantastic nib. So what are my pros and cons for the 1960s 149 fountain pen? Well, I think this is the best everyday writer out of all of the 149s that Montblanc has made, just because you don't have any of those issues that I outlined earlier with celluloid and their more complicated filling systems. I think you're getting the best nib here, the best comfort with the lighter weight body than the modern one, and I just think you're getting the best quality without going to the celluloid ones. So I really like that. As you guys know, this is my second favorite pen after the Aurora Optima, so I really, really like these pens. They're very comfortable, they have great nibs, they're just fantastic, fantastic writers. Now, in terms of cons, identifying the older ones can be tricky. Some people do try to charge a lot for the older ones. I do think they still should be cheaper than a new one. So I want to say, unless it has some crazy weird nib, about $1,000 would be like kind of the max price as of 2025 I would pay for one of these 1960s models. Some people will ask for more, but just wait for a good one or try to negotiate. A lot of people don't like Montblanc for whatever reason. This is a boring looking pen. I've seen this pen, a million times now all over the place, so the design is not interesting at all, but it's classic and it just works well as an everyday writing tool. That's pretty much it. If you guys have this pen, do you like this pen? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more fountain pen, paper, and ink videos, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much, and until next time.